Well, welcome to week 2 of HSM Reads the Bible, the podcast. I'm Zach.
I'm Makayla.
I'm Dylan.
And man, week 1 of the reading, guys. First 21 chapters of Genesis. A lot of ground to cover.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get in to kind of talking through what we read, I do want to know, what was one thing that really stuck out to you in the reading this week?
Oh, you're looking at me.
Yeah,
so
you want to give it a whirl?
Okay. I would say one thing that stood out to me was early on in the reading, in the creation and the fall, so Genesis 1-3, you see God say over and over, and God said, and God said, and God said. And then the first question we see is the serpent asking Adam and Eve, did God really say? And obviously, like, that's significant for a lot of reasons, but one of them is, like, that echoes through the whole Bible of, did God really say? And so that has always been profound to me. And when I think about in my life, how often that question, like, is tempting in my mind of, like, did God really say? So that was the first thing that stood out to me.
Come on. Dill, big takeaway?
Yeah, it's pretty cliche, and I could leave it at one word, but just I think the faithfulness of God. We were talking before we started about how a lot of years, a lot of things happened between Genesis 1 and Genesis chapter 21, and the little red thread for me throughout the whole thing was God's faithfulness in spite of the faithlessness of his people.
Man.
And so,
Yeah, I think mine was similar, but this time there's just a few things that, and it was so interesting, but these are passages that I'm familiar with. I've read a lot, I've taught on, I've studied, but there were just a few things that jumped out to me this week in reading that I hadn't really seen as clearly before, and one of them was just the kindness of God. Like, God's kindness shows up over and over and over again, even in the parts where you also see his justice, his mercy, his justice, his wrath. Like, he's so kind. And there's that verse later in the New Testament that says it's the kindness of God that moves us to repentance. And man, it was just on display in a way that I hadn't seen before. It was cool.
Yeah.
It was cool. Come on. Well, I hope for you that there were some things that stuck out to you in the reading as well. The way that I think we should structure the HSM Reads the Bible podcast, is to take those 3 questions in the front of the book and use them to structure our conversation. So the first one being, what do we see about God in the reading? Because it's the story of God. It's about him, so we start with him. Second, what do we see about God's people? What do we see about humanity in the text? And then at the end, to just say, like, man, what are the questions that maybe we have as we read this text? Like, this week there were a few passages that are a little wild. And so just to spend some time kind of talking through, man, what is exactly going on in things like Babel or Sodom and Gomorrah? Or, man, there were a bunch of animals that got cut in half when God makes promises to Abraham. That's weird. And so let's talk about that some too. But to start, what did you guys see about God this week?
is it? So I'm going.
Whichever one. You know,
Right.
I don't know where to look.
Yeah. I'll let that be the cue wherever you're looking. So, let me tell you, one thing I saw about God, and it kind of goes in with what you're saying about God's kindness, is that doesn't change. God doesn't change.
Yeah.
You talked about this idea yesterday that God is holy love. And we see that really in Genesis chapters 1 and 2, like this intimate relationship that God has with his people, walking with them in the garden. And then sin enters the picture in Genesis chapter 3. Spoiler alert, sorry. And
this is coming out after we've read the whole week. There's no spoilers. We're good.
It's fine.
We're good.
But and then sin enters the picture, and immediately God makes a promise to restore his people.
Yeah.
That's holy love. And that doesn't change. And this might be a spoiler. That doesn't change throughout the whole Bible, the whole story. And that was pretty amazing to me.
Man.
So, yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Kayla, initial thoughts?
Yeah, I think oftentimes we talk about God in the Old Testament as if he's different from God in the New Testament.
Yeah.
Specifically, we talk about God in the Old Testament as being, like, really angry or wrathful. And again, just going back to the beginning, when Adam and Eve rebel and they sin, it's not like God didn't know that, and yet he comes looking for them, and he says, like, where'd you go? Like, where are you?
Yeah.
And that strikes me because, like, I don't know if you think about like as a kid when you're in trouble, like, and you do something you're not supposed to do and your parent hears it from another room, they're like, Dylan, Dad, like the immediate response is like, ah. And I think that's kind of how I expect God to react. Like, they just sinned for the first time, big deal. And instead of God, like, thunderclap, lightning, whatever, he just comes looking for them. He's like, what happened? What'd you do? And then, like, the saddest verse in the Bible, one of them, is like, and they hid. And so, in the, kind of to the same thing we've all been hinting at, is that God would have been totally just to react a different way, to bring the justice and the lightning, and it's not instead, that's the wrong word, but like God chooses to show them mercy. Like, there's a consequence. They're like kicked out of Eden.
Deep consequence.
Yeah. Like a travesty. Like, they're kicked out of God's presence. It says, that there was an angel to keep them from coming back because, like, they knew what they were missing, and still God doesn't abandon them.
Yeah. Come on. Man, there's something that I had written down as I was just kind of taking notes as I read, based kind of around what you were saying of like, I mean, it really matters the way that you hear God's voice when he asks Adam and Eve those questions. Is he asking, where are you?
Yeah.
Not a Batman reference, but, whatever. or is he asking, man, hey, where are you?
Yeah.
Why are you hiding? Like, the way we hear God's voice there really matters, and I think the way that you read it is right.
Yeah.
That it's kind and it's compassionate, and it's sad. Like, I think it's a sad place. I think it really matters that we notice that creation comes through God speaking, and that, like, when God speaks, there's power to it. And I think it's important for a few reasons. One of them is jumping ahead, we're going to see Jesus come, and a lot of the way that Jesus is bringing the kingdom is through speaking. And sometimes we can read it like the miracles bring the kingdom, but the teachings don't. But it's like, no, just a reminder, like, when God speaks, there's real power of creation in that. I think that matters. And I don't know, it also just kind of caught me of like, man, our words have a lot of power to them too. Not to the same extent that God's does. Not that we can like create worlds with our words, but we do have a lot of power to build up and tear down.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. What else? What do you guys see? I know we're camping out. We're going to talk a lot about Genesis 1, 2, and 3 because there's a ton in those three chapters. But even beyond that, what are some other things that we see about God?
I think one of the things I noticed is there's a couple covenants early on. There's a covenant.
Pause. What is a covenant? Because that word's going to really, really matter. And it shows up with Noah. It shows up with Abraham. What is a covenant? Who wants to take it?
Not me.
I mean, at its base form, you can elaborate on this. I mean, it's an agreement between God and his people.
Yeah.
I'm going to say this, and I hope our listeners don't freak out, but the most common that we see is this thing called a suzerain vassal treaty.
Suzerain vassal treaty.
That sounds scary. All that simply means is leader, patron. So an example could be a big kingdom makes an agreement with a little kingdom for protection, for whatever. And so we see God make I think the biggest example is the covenant that God makes with Abraham in Genesis chapters 12 and 17 and all that and the other. But yeah, at its base form, it is an agreement between God and his people.
Yeah. The only things I would add is when you read covenant, you should also think about the word relationship. The covenant is laying out the terms of a relationship between those two parties.
Yeah.
And so when God's making covenants, those are relational in nature. I think that's an important piece. And covenants are binding, which we'll talk more about. But please, go on.
Yeah. So the first one we see is with Noah. And this one I think is just so fascinating that we see the flood narrative. So everything's been flooded. And then God says to Noah, I'm going to make a covenant with you that I will never flood the earth again. And he's like, the sign will be the bow in the clouds, which we understand to be the rainbow. I thought you were going to say something there for a second. No, just a strong head nod. Okay, great.
Absolutely true.
So we understand that sign of the covenant to be the rainbow. But what's so interesting about it, and this is where like what Dylan was talking about matters, is it's God is the one that holds and guarantees the covenant. So in like the ancient world, you mentioned the suzerain vassal covenants, the weaker party had to have the proof of the covenant in order to kind of hold on to it, so that they could say, no, you made a covenant with me, and here's the proof. Here's my receipts.
Yeah.
That's modern lingo. You have to have the receipts. But instead of God telling Noah, you got to hold on to the receipts to hold me to my end of the deal, he's like,
Yeah.
I'm going to hold it. Not only am I doing something for you that you don't deserve and you couldn't do for yourself, but like, I'm going to guarantee it for you.
Yeah.
And then we see it again with Abraham. And that's says a lot about who God is.
Yeah, it's incredible stuff. And one of the key ideas that we'll hit over and over and over again is when God makes a covenant, he is always faithful to keep his covenant. There's never a moment that God does not keep his covenant.
Yeah, and I think with me, as I was reading, like, yeah, God is faithful. God is faithful. God doesn't change. This presence of holy love is present throughout the whole thing. But at the same time, God is also just.
Yeah.
And God cares for his creation.
Okay, there are a couple other things that kind of jumped out at me about God that I just wanted to hit. One of them, and I'd never noticed this before until now, but it says something about the character of God that after sin, instead of God killing Eve receives her name.
Yeah.
Have y'all ever seen that?
Yeah.
No, actually.
Like, Eve isn't named
For
until
she is
after the fall.
Mother of all the living.
Yeah. And there's even her name is like, hey, there's more that's going to come from you. Like, yes, sin has broken in, and yes, the curse has broken in, but like, you will be the mother of all. And instead of God immediately striking her dead, which he would have been fully within his rights to do, she receives a name and she receives clothing. And what a glimpse of God's kindness and compassion and mercy and grace that in the midst of humanity's rebellion, Eve gets named and she receives clothing. Like, that's some stuff. Okay. What do y'all know about the angel of the Lord?
This is Zach's favorite.
No, this actually really matters, I think. So
the angel of the Lord.
I love it when Dylan does this.
I'll say it. I think it's Jesus.
I would also agree. And the reason that I would agree is there are a lot of times in the Old Testament. One of the biggest ones is later we'll see in a few weeks with Moses at the burning bush, where Yahweh, God, is specifically named. The angel of the Lord is specifically named. And then they're really blurred together. And the way that the text reads is you're kind of supposed to be like, is the angel of the Lord God? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And so my best understanding of it, and maybe it's not 100% accurate, is that this is Jesus showing up before the incarnation, before he takes on flesh, but Jesus is appearing.
Well, we see these two names, right? We see God show up in I am.
Right.
And then in John 8, who does Jesus say he is to the Pharisees before Abraham was? I am.
So I think there's some good argument, but let's just go with me here. Let's say the angel of the Lord is Jesus. The very first time the angel of the Lord shows up is to Hagar. She is not part of the covenant. She is a woman. And so in both of those places of the ancient world, she doesn't have a ton of like status in the culture. And the first time the angel of the Lord shows up in the text is not to Moses, it's not to Abraham, it's to Hagar. And then we jump all the way forward to the New Testament, and the first person that Jesus reveals who he is to is the woman at the well in Samaria. Another person who doesn't have a lot of status in her culture. She's a woman. She's had 5 husbands. She's going to the well in the middle of the day to avoid the stares of the people. And I just, again, when we're asking, like, what do we see about God, I think that teaches us something about who God is.
Yeah.
That he is choosing to reveal himself in these really powerful, important, significant ways to people that most of the time people be reading the story and think that's such a minor character. Like, why? But God sees them and he cares about them. I don't know. That really struck me as I was reading this week.
Yeah. It reminds me when Jesus says, like, I've come to heal the sick, not the healthy. You know, like, I'm coming for the sinners, those who need salvation. But you're right. That does say a lot about who God is.
Man. All right, so question 2 then, like, what do we see about humanity in all of this?
I mean, as you know, God creates humanity, the climax of creation, and then he looks over everything that he had made, which I think this is a side note, but I think the order of creation is really interesting. In the first 3 days, God makes creation, right? It's like he makes this house, and then he fills it, and then he puts his people as the head of that house, right? To fill it.
Master of the house.
Sorry. What was that?
That's a Les Miserables
I
reference.
knew the reference, but
That's staying in. But no, and he makes man in his own image. And one of the biggest examples of our God likeness was that we were created to rule.
Yeah.
And he finishes everything, and then he looks over everything that he made, and he says, "It is very good."
To that too, like you talked about earlier, that God creates through his word, but then it says that he forms them from the dust of the ground and he breathes his life into them, which is different than everything else.
Yeah. Makayla, you've mentioned a few times a quote of like how we understand like Genesis 1-2 versus like 3 through Revelation. Do you want? I'm butchering the quote. Do you want to bring it?
I think it's Andy Crouch, but he says most believers live their whole life only knowing the story of the Bible from Genesis 3 to Revelation 20, I believe. So if you think about what's happening in the parts that get left out, that's Genesis 1 and 2, and it's Revelation 21.
Yeah.
Well, Genesis 1 and 2 are the Garden of Eden, the way God made it to be very good. When humanity is exactly as God intended them, they're with him, God's dwelling with them in the garden. And then Revelation 21 is the promise that we hold on to and hope that God will come back and restore all things. There will be a new heaven and a new earth, and he will dwell with us again. But unfortunately, like the story that most believers know is like we're sinners and God's mad at us.
Yeah. It feels like the difference in like trying to escape punishment or looking forward to restoration and renewal. Like I just keep having this picture of like it matters that we know that the story is bookended with like very good, overflowing, abundant life. And it was the reminder of like, oh, that's why it's so important that we don't minimize. Like it's so easy for us, I think, to be like, that sin's no big deal. Like it's little. Like I know I probably shouldn't talk about people that way, but like it's fine. Or like I know I shouldn't say those words. It's fine. I know maybe listening to that's not helpful. It's fine. But sin leads to sin, leads to sin, leads to sin, and before you know it, it's just spiraling out of control.
I thought it was really interesting as I read, just in my personal study recently, one of the things that I came across was that the biggest thing that sin does, we've discussed, is that it separates. From 3 primary things. It separates us from God, it separates us from one another, and it separates us from life. And it's really interesting, as you read through it, how you see that happen.
And yet, God pursues his people. And I think that's one of the crazy things is like in light of everything that we just said, God still pursues his people. And you know, one of the key things, and we'll hit this a ton through the year, but like all that he asks of his people is to trust him. That despite all of this, God would say, hey, I will come, I will pursue you, I will make all things new. Trust me. Okay. There's 3 passages I just want to touch on briefly because I one of the points of this podcast is to be like, hey, reading the Bible can be hard. So like, help us understand what we're doing. So 3 things that I thought we should talk about, and if there's one that y'all want to throw in there, we can get into it too. But I want to talk about the Tower of Babel because it's weird.
It's weird.
It's weird. There's a tower being built. I want to talk about Abraham cutting a bunch of cows in half. And then a flame passing through it, because that's weird too. And then we should spend some time talking a little bit about Sodom and Gomorrah, and like it's a tough passage to read.
It's
a tough one.
It's
why is that in the Bible? Okay, so let's kind of take them sequentially. What's up with Babel?
Babel's interesting. Babel is really interesting because after Noah leaves the ark in the flood, God actually gives him the same command that he gave to Adam and Eve, to multiply, to fill the earth, and subdue it. But the next part is where things go wrong. And it's where they say, let's build a great city here so that we won't be scattered across the earth. And so it is this complete rejection of God's command that he gave to Abraham to fill the earth and subdue it. But on top of that, they try to seek this divine status, kind of what we see Adam and Eve do in the garden again, by building this tower, but to connect heaven and earth, to seek this divine status, so they wouldn't be scattered. So we see, God commands his people to multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, to make his name known in creation. And so we see the people say, let's not be scattered. Let's gather here and instead make a name for ourselves. And so it's just like, again, I've said this 15 times in the past 30 seconds, complete rejection of God's command that he gave to his people.
The language thing is interesting.
The language thing is really interesting.
Like, it's like, oh, that was just a tag that whoever wrote Genesis threw on there at the end. It was like, and God scattered them and confused their language. Oh, okay. And And there's all sorts of ways to read that, but I do think one of them is like we kind of see some of God's kindness and mercy in that too. Like as much as it is a like frustration of the people's plans, God's like, hey, if you won't listen and obey me, like, hey, I'm gonna make you do it. Like I'm gonna scatter your language. I'm gonna send you. And so there's something there. But
which is just I think another example of like God's never out of control. Like his plans aren't thwarted. It's not like, oh no, my plan is in jeopardy, therefore I'm going to do this. It's him being like, okay, I'm going to help you out here.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal. Okay. What's up with the cutting of the cows in half? Like, why in the world does that happen?
Great question.
Suzerain vassal treaty.
I was waiting for it.
It's actually pretty simple to understand. Whenever these treaties would be made, both parties would take animals, split them in half, and then they would do this thing where they would walk through it together. This, I think, is important.
This is the key.
This is super key because that doesn't happen in God's covenant with Abraham.
But before you tell them that, like, why do they walk through the animals?
So they walk through the animal that has been slaughtered and mutilated and split in half to basically say,
lots of blood.
If one of us doesn't fulfill this covenant, if we don't do what we said we were going to do, they're basically saying, let us have the same fate as these animals right here.
Right.
But Abraham doesn't walk through.
Right.
It's only God. Why?
It's back to the same thing as Noah. God is saying, I will be the one to guarantee this. I will take on the punishment if you don't keep up your end of the bargain, which points forward again to Jesus on the cross. Other thing to note, too, is it doesn't say, like, the figure of God walks through. It says there's, like, a smoking pot in fire, right?
Yeah, what's that about? That's interesting.
It's important to note because we'll see it again, notably when the Israelites are wandering in the desert, but God often shows up to his people as fire and smoke. So, like,
burning bush
on top of Mount Sinai.
Tabernacle.
Top of Mount Carmel.
Yeah, there's a lot of places. So, like, it's definitely a theme that you'll...
Pentecost.
Yes. That we'll see again. Fire and smoke often is symbolic of God's presence. Or not just symbolic, but like literally are present when God is present.
Big deal.
Yeah.
Okay. Sodom and Gomorrah.
Oh, man.
It's tough.
Do we have to? No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, I don't want to get like all the way into the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
But I think one of the main pieces that we're supposed to see with Sodom and Gomorrah is like, this is ultimately... when sin spirals, this is where it leads to. You've just got utter corruption. You've got utter blindness. You've got all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And Sodom and Gomorrah is a tragedy.
Yeah.
It is.
And it like tells us more about who God is.
Yeah.
That, like, while we've said like God is merciful and he's faithful, he is also just and he is also wrathful, and that's not a bad thing.
No.
Yeah. There was, I think, as I was reading through this, one of the points where I was just like, man, was actually after Abraham was like, 45 people. You wouldn't destroy the city if there's 45 people in it, like righteous people in it. And then he gets all the way down to 10.
The reverse auctioneer.
Yeah, exactly.
Do I have 20? Do I have 15?
15?
Do I have,
a nickel. But and it's like, okay, so the scene is set. So if this town is searched out and there are 10 righteous people, it won't get destroyed. Yeah. And then we see these angels go down to Lot's house. And this is where it was just a gut punch. It said that the men left the city to go take advantage of the angels, and it said, to the last man.
Yeah.
And it's like, man.
Well, what even hit me on this one, and this, to land us in a place that's not just like, oh, this is awful, but like, there's no one. Like, even Lot, who gets rescued, he's a bad dude.
He's
like,
not
he like, when it's easy sometimes to read these stories and be like, wait, is that a good thing? Like, Lot offers his daughters instead of the angels, and it's not good. Like, that's not showing us, oh, what a righteous guy Lot is.
Correct.
That's actually to show us even Lot is like pretty despicable.
Yeah.
But God rescues Lot.
Yeah.
Because he made a promise to Abraham. And God's always faithful to his promises.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other piece I just want us to see in the Sodom and Gomorrah episode is in the midst of just intense wickedness, God still keeps his promises.
Yeah.
He always, always, always is faithful. And then somebody turns into a pillar of salt.
Yeah.
That's bad news.
But I do think what you just said is super important to note, that just because there's a story about something happening in the Bible, it doesn't mean that it's good.
Right.
Doesn't mean that God is happy about it.
No.
And I think that when we read some of these texts in the Old Testament that are really dark, it's important to remind us that it's an example showing us what sin does, not that this is something that God is happy about.
Yeah, the flood narrative, I think, is the best example of that. God was grieved.
Yeah.
Like it hurt.
Yeah.
Which is pretty amazing to think about.
Yeah.
It's wild. Yeah.
Man. Okay.
That was a lot.
God is good. He is righteous. He is holy. He creates a very good world. It's supposed to be that way. All the brokenness is an invasion, not the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
But man, the story of God pursuing his people and his faithfulness to them has begun, and it's going to unfold over the rest of Scripture.
Pretty cool. Okay, Garden of Eden. That was part of our reading for the week.
Great.
What is one thing that you wish you could have seen / are excited to see again?
Oh man, I can answer this off the bat.
Great.
Okay.
This morning, I went to the zoo with my daughter, and one of the tigers was out. Like I'm talking like 5 feet, just behind this, and it was just like pacing back and forth.
Yeah.
And I was like, really want to scratch its head. Really kind of want to like, you know. Yeah. Number one answer is to walk in the presence of God.
Yeah,
let me just say
that. That's the answer.
That is the answer. Let me just get that out of the way.
And then you want to.
I do want to. Yeah, it was cool.
I love to eat.
Oh man.
I can't wait to taste the fruit of the tree of life.
That's pretty cool.
That's gonna taste so good. Like,
I feel really dumb about my answer now.
Mine's
No,
about food.
I agree with you, Dylan.
Yeah, but the tree of life.
Whenever there's like
that's
a little
big.
creature in the backyard, I'm like, oh, one day it won't be afraid of me anymore.
There you go.
It'll be fine.
Or I won't be afraid of it.
Or I won't be afraid of it. Yeah, no. More like the cute little bunnies. No.
Yeah.
But
That,
like, think
or
about like the best steak you've ever had or whatever. Think about like life fruit. That'll be sick.
Life.
That or like in like scenes in like Lord of the Rings or Narnia that are like so like magical and beautiful and like story like. I'm like, I bet Heaven's gonna have some of that.
Yeah.
And I'm excited for that.
Come on. What's your answer?
That was mine.
your
/
answer.
also I agree with Dylan with the little creatures. One day when we can be friends.
Come on. All right. Well, thanks for joining us for week 2 of HSM Reads the Bible,
The
the podcast.